I'm Dennis Rubin, your interim fire chief, and it's my honor to present Putting Out Fires, the August edition. I truly hope that you had a chance to watch the first edition in July last month and that it made sense and it helped us to open up the lines of communications. I think, as everyone is well aware, in 5 or 6 or 7 times, something on that order, in the last report from the consultant, the concern was that the organization doesn't have much transparency, isn't communicating with our members, and have simply failed to have a dialogue that's important. That's what the design of this program is. We're going to continue to bring along great speakers that have incredible information, whether it's a review information or fresh information to you on our stations. And each time we're going to close with a couple of questions from the field to the chief. I hope you enjoy it. Sit back, relax, have some fun. And here we go with the second edition, the August edition of Putting Out Fires. Boy, do I have a tall guy hanging out with me today. I'd like to introduce you to Josh Magaha. He is a rover driver on the first shift, and he is going to talk about fentanyl, some of the effects thereof, as well as how we're going to be treating that in the field. I know it seems like it's almost a national epidemic if it hasn't become so. What's your thoughts on the opening about that?
Well, kind of how I got involved with fentanyl. First thing, as an EMT, how does an EMT get involved with fentanyl? Back in 2015, I was sent to Baltimore, the hazmat conference, and stumbled into class with Chief Gray, and it was about weapons of mass destruction over fentanyl. So I kind of took it from there and slowly started training the department when we came back about weapons of mass destruction, and started realizing it's an epidemic now regarding our youth and adult population.
It's pretty amazing when you look at the statistics and some of the information that's coming out nationwide. I can recall recently going on a few alarms. In one case, a gentleman had gone unconscious, unresponsive at a traffic light with his car in gear and the car running. So, of course, we had to secure the vehicle before we could help him. And unfortunately, he didn't make it. But I'm assuming you're seeing things that are kind of odd and abnormal as this use continues.
Yes, one of the things that we're starting to teach within the schools and the youth in our city and county is that we're seeing the Romeo and Juliet situation where we have boyfriend, girlfriend. They both are overdosing together. So it's not uncommon for us to run multiple overdoses at the same time. I do know Sandstone had close to 10 overdoses in this past week, which is in the western side of our county, which Bonner Springs responds to. If they get overcome, we will run with them. So we're seeing multiple times, or if we run into a hotel situation, I've been with 3 overdoses, the most that I've personally ran at one time, which puts a strain on our system, which could take every piece of Narcan out of our ambulance or pumper.
So one of the tips that you would give our responders is that to be aware, make sure that they get a patient count early and try to account for everybody that may be in that apartment, may be in that home, may be in that automobile if they're needing assistance or help. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you could take a patient count. You got to triage it just like any other MBA because you don't know how many patients are going to be walking in. One of the things that I find interesting is that the fentanyl, the drug dealers who are producing the fentanyl in the labs or in the pill mills in Kansas City, they are actually carrying Narcan, which we'll see. We give that in our health department, and also First Call over in Kansas City, Missouri. They give these out for free, not First Call, the body retrieval, but actual First Call is in Kansas City, Missouri. They're handing these out, and if you go into the drug dealers, they actually hang this on their door inside the house so they can give the Narcan, or they're actually mixing the pills because they know how potent fentanyl is. So as us as first responders, if we run into a call and we have multiple overdoses, we need to realize, is this an actual pill overdose, or are we actually going into a lab or something? Because we do have to worry about that in our city.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm sorry I'm changing your train of thought, but now it becomes a hazard for us as well. Did I say that correctly?
Correct. Yes, so on our hazmat rig, so I was assigned to 2s for 14 years. So on that rig, we actually carry Narcan. We actually carry a block in that rig. So we're actually carrying 10. And the difference between our actual Narcan of 2 milligrams and the nasal Narcan, these are 4. What we're going to run to as the fire side is we're going to immediately grab these. So in a fentanyl overdose, typically we're seeing in the field, and most of the medics will agree, you're using 2 to 3 of these on most overdoses, where this is 4 milligrams. So usually 1 or 2 of these will work compared to 2 or 3 of our Narcan. So us being first responders, if we are affected by it, we're going to have to remember to up our dose, because if it is fentanyl, this was okay for morphine, heroin, and our typical overdoses that we ran, 5 years ago, but this is not enough typically for our fentanyl overdoses. So, and even that for our patients, we're going to have to bring multiple naloxones with us into the call, and not just, one. One's not going to cut it anymore, or they're going to relapse if it's a heavy enough dose.
I've been on a few calls where the police arrive first, again, back east, and the police will indicate that they've tried at least to put 2 or 3 doses perhaps on board, and there's no reaction or results. You want to talk a little bit about that?
So the reason that you're seeing a slower response with your nasal, and we also have a nasal atomizer that we can use, and we can actually put the naloxone in the nasal atomizer and shoot it in as well. But the reason that our Narcan is going to work quicker on the job if we do it intravenously is because IV is the quickest form of method. Nasal is actually the third fastest method, so it's going to take a while for the body to pick it up through the nasal passageway and get into the bloodstream. So the 4 ways that you can actually apply naloxone is IV, nasal, intermuscular, and they also have like an EpiPen type deal they're actually giving out. I have not seen those, but they are out there. So those are the 4 ways that we can give them. But
And into the bloodstream is the fastest route by
bloodstream's
far,
going to be your
of course.
fastest route. Anytime you do an IV, but the typical citizen and cop's not going to start an IV.
If the patient is not breathing, or their breathing rate has slowed almost to a stop, will you need to support that?
Yes. So the way that fentanyl works is it takes our respiratory drive away. So the one thing we can do, if we don't have enough naloxone or Narcan on scene, we run out and the patient's still not coming back, we can bag them. We're going to start breathing for them. We don't have to do CPR. Their heart's going to beat, but we have to bag them. We have to breathe them for them.
Oral pharyngeal before we start bagging?
Yes, you can do an oropharyngeal.
Okay, that would be recommended, I would hope.
Yes.
That's pretty much the normal process to maintain a patent airway. And then what else should we expect on the outbound end? So in other words, the patient comes around, we've now sent that into their system. It's going through their lungs and around their body through the circulatory system. What's likely to happen once they become conscious?
So as most of our medics know, we've seen on scene, as soon as you slam a bunch of Narcan into a patient, they're going to come back and they're going to start vomiting. Fentanyls, we don't titrate really anymore unless we know it's like a morphine or heroin overdose, which even those, you don't even know if they're laced with fentanyl. So you're going to slam them with a bunch of Narcan and they're going to come up, they're going to be extremely pissed off, and they're going to start vomiting. So you have to have an emesis bag with you or you're going to be wearing it. So it's just standard nature.
Just always good to have those reminders. I saw a study that came out of Houston. I'm going to change topics for just a few seconds. And it was a brain injury study. And what it described is in almost every case that they took a look at, and it was a longitudinal study of over 1,000 folks nationwide, is that when a person's in great distress and not breathing, the rate that we use the bag valve mask is always too fast, is always pushing too much oxygen too quick, and in this case, not letting the medicine to soak in. So what's the rate? What would you ask a person to do? Again, as only a reminder, I know we have some great EMTs and paramedics out there, but what is the proper rate for a bag valve mask?
You want to focus on that 10 to 12 times a minute, about 1 every time, 6 seconds roughly. That would be our rate. I know our ACS is 8 to 10 now, but 10 is that key number.
Perfect. And also, too, I think the bag valves can go somewhere between 750 milliliters or even 1,000, and about half of the bag content is typically what an average person's lungs would need to be filled up. So in other words, overinflation and too fast of a rate came out of that study from Houston.
Correct. So I think hyperventilation has pretty much been taken out of our protocol, and we've been using a pediatric bag valve mask now. Correct. That's
Good. That's really good. Where would we expect to find fentanyl at? What areas of our community, and how will it be distributed?
So the way that fentanyl's coming, I'm not getting a political discussion, but it's coming across the border. It's coming across our southern border, and why is KCK a hotspot? KCK is a hotspot because we're the intersection of I-70 and I-35. We have the best distribution across the Midwest and the entire United States. So as it comes up, it stops in our city. and it comes across into the trap houses or drug houses, and they're going to distribute it to all their drug dealers throughout the city. You can pick it up at 78th and I-70 right at Quick Trip. That's where a lot of our American Motel, that's where we're seeing a lot of our overdoses. That's where a lot of the pills come from. Through the school districts that I've taught, the kids are picking them up in that area. It's mimicked into a hydrocodone or to a Percocet or a Perc 30 is what they call it, or a Hydro 80. And it's a blue or green pill, and then they'll cut it up, or they'll cut it into quarters or eighths or halves, however they want to distribute it. But I always tell people it's like a cookie. When we go to Thanksgiving, we have a bunch of cookies on a plate, and there's a bunch of chocolate chips in that cookie. But we can never tell how many chocolate chips are in that cookie, but that chocolate chip is the fentanyl. And if we take a chocolate chip cookie and it's got a ton of chocolate chips in it, and we bite it, it tastes great. Same thing with a pill. We have no idea what's in that pill, and that's the fentanyl, until you bite into it or you take it, and it's how much fentanyl's been mixed with that pill. So that's why we're getting a huge overdose situation, because these are not produced in labs. They're produced in the jungle. They're produced by, street pharmacists. So as they mix them in a magic bullet, it's the blender of choice. That's what they prefer to use in the streets. And they mix it up and they put a binder in it and they press them. And the DEA, when we went to Baltimore in 2016, Chief Gray and I were actually producing fentanyl pills. And the DEA at that point realized that the drug presses, you have to register with the DEA site. Drug dealers don't register their pill presses. So with that being said, the pill presses were the very first ones registered on the DEA site, were the DEA's pill presses that we were using.
So just to make sure that our listening audience, viewing audience gets the idea, that was for a training evolution. For you to manufacture the pills.
Correct. That was for a training evolution. We weren't making them. It was actually for us to understand how
it gets made. Correct. Wow. What a great course that sounds like it was.
Yes.
What are some of the statistics associated with this scourge of society?
So with our county alone, I did my last presentation for St. James High School about a month ago, and I had our stats. So before every presentation I do with our schools, I always ask our medical side the current stats. So as of July 4th, we had 599 overdoses to date in our county. I think 250 of those were Narcan was used. So that means, our overdose in our county doesn't mean, because we also have alcohol and some other things that contribute to the overdose rate. But Narcan was used in like 250 times of that. So over half of those Narcan was used. So more than likely it was fentanyl. Within those 250 times, we don't keep track of our fatality statistics. PD does. So PD, as of July 5th, had 23 fatalities this year alone from fentanyl. Last year, PD had 40, and we had 499 overdoses all of last year. So we're already 100 overdoses over from last year, and our fatality rate is almost twice. So
we'll be bumping about 800 roughly calls and about 500 doses of naloxone provided. Wow, that's staggering. That's truly staggering.
And those numbers continue to climb, and we're not seeing. So this is why we're out in the public and the community trying to educate. They're not targeting people of you or my age. They're targeting our kids. They're targeting 11 to 18-year-olds. So the best thing that I always tell my kids and any of the kids that we present to is don't take a pill, don't take a Tylenol, don't take ibuprofen unless a parent gives it to you or a physician or a nurse, someone who's trusted. And with the other thing we don't want people to be afraid of is fentanyl, because fentanyl does have a great pharmacological or pharmaceutical use. But it needs to be in a hospital setting and monitored.
What's the primary function of fentanyl when it's under those controls as a Rexall drug?
Fentanyl is used as a breakthrough pain for like cancer. They found out like morphine, not heroin, but morphine and Dilaudid doesn't take the pain away as much as fentanyl does. Fentanyl is a manufactured drug. It's synthetic. So it's not something that's found in a natural state and out in nature.
So used properly, it's a benefit to the society.
Correct.
However, the uses that we have seen on the street and to become a profit center as well as get high has been just a disaster.
Correct. So that's the reason actually fentanyl has rose to the number one drug trade, is because heroin, 10 years ago, you could buy a kilo of heroin, which is about 2.2 pounds. You could buy a kilo of heroin on the black web or dark web. You could buy it for $7,000. you can buy the same amount of fentanyl for about $3,500 on the dark web. And that heroin, the kilo of heroin is going to yield you $70,000 of profit, where a kilo of fentanyl is going to yield you about $2 million in profit.
Wow.
So that's why the drug trade has went that route.
We'll be chasing this for many, many years to come. I know some of the elementary schools back east have installed vending machines where you can obtain naloxone by pulling a lever or pushing a button, which I think speaks volumes about where our society is at and most likely where we're headed. This is going to continue to be a problem for many years to come. Wouldn't you agree?
100%.
Are we missing any important parts?
No, I think reach out to your local health department, reach out to anybody, reach out to me or the DEA or Captain Diaz with the KCKPD. We present all over Kansas City. We've hit about 10,000 kids so far this year. We're doing a presentation next week for the state of Kansas for the youth conference with another 10,000 kids supposedly supposed to be there. Just reach out, ask any questions. I think that's more knowledge is better. The more your knowledge about it, the better off you'll be prepared for if it does happen.
Excellent, Josh. I cannot thank you for taking time out of your very busy day, the great work that you do, the education that you provide, and I hope they're bringing you to some fire conferences, EMS conferences as well, meaning, boy, you're just a wealth of information, and we truly, truly appreciate that. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Josh. What a great information. What an incredible presentation. Truly appreciate that. And now it's your turn to speak directly to the fire chief with burning questions. The first burning question today comes from
Harvey Fields, plan reviewer and fire inspector with KCK Fire Department. My question is, currently KCK Fire Department is one, if not the only department in the metro area that does not collect permit fees for the installation and review of fire alarms. And so the department is missing out on that revenue. My question is that a possibility of getting that changed so that the department can start to receive that revenue?
Mr. Harvey Fields, what a great question from fire prevention. With that said, I hope that we can start taking a look at charging fees associated with fire prevention inspections. And of course, what that will lead to is to be able to permit things like alarm systems and other circumstances, the building itself that you have mentioned. In order to do that, though, I'm sure you're well aware, it's going to have to go through legislation, which is going to take the approval of my boss, her boss, and then on into our commission. So hang in there. I think having that possibility of doing permitting for a fire alarm system is very, very important. I took a look at some statistics after your question, and I want to say we did about 1,200 fire alarm activations last year. This year, we're probably going to double it, which is very confusing to me, but maybe that's leading to a boom, if you will, in construction throughout the community. But it is something we've got to get a handle on. We simply don't want to continue to waste the resource in fire alarm systems, and having a permitting process that you mentioned is a really important consideration. Thank you again. Truly appreciate it. Continue to be safe out there.
Firefighter Tawan Smith. I got a question for you, Chief Rubin. What is your plans on cross-staffing the rescue?
Tawan Smith, Truck 1, number 2 shift. That's an excellent question. I agree with you. I would hope someday that we'll have separate staffing of 4 on both the rescue as well as the ladder truck. That's the hope, that's the vision, that's the long term. The practical reality, however, is that we simply do not have the financial capacity to make that move. We're hoping over a few years that we continue to improve as a county government to be able to add more firefighters. But at this point, I'm sad to say you're going to continue to have to be a firefighter that's assigned to both the rescue and the ladder truck when you're assigned at Station 1 on the ladder truck, or whether you're assigned at Station 6. But again, thank you for taking the time to ask that question. All right, that has it. That's a wrap, as we say in the business. Truly appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to be a part of putting out the fires.